In this video, we're going to cover variable scope, and the basic idea of scope is what information can be seen and where can it be seen. We're going to stay inside of our basics function solutions where we created two methods, one called printName and one called printMore, and we called them from our main method right here on line 11, here on line 14, and here on line number 16. Now, the whole idea of variable scope is information inside of a method can only be seen inside of that particular method. And let me show you an example of that. I'm going to come down here to line number 20, so inside of the print name method. And instead of kind of hard coding my name in here, I'm going to go ahead and create a variable that holds it. So I'm going to create a variable to hold username. So it's going to be a string, and then a space. I'm going to call it username equals a text string of Dan, and then a semicolon. And inside of my console.writeLine, I'm going to go ahead and add that in here with concatenation. So I'm going to see where it says Dan. I'm going to take that out. I'm going to end that text string, so I put a double quote in, a plus sign, type in the user name, and notice it pops right up, plus sign, and then the double quote to start the next one, and then this is the separate text quote. So we have one quote here, one text string here. I'm going to put a space right there. Concatenated in the variable username, and then concatenated in the ending text string up to the program. So now if I run this, it should look the same. So welcome Dan to the program, which is great because this variable username is said to be scoped to the function printName. So if you create a variable inside of a method, it is said to be scoped to that method itself. Now, this is important because if I come back up here into my main method, so in between these closing curly brackets, and if I try to do a console.writeLine, open close, and a semicolon, inside of here, if I just try to use the user name, notice it does not come up in the completion box, and I spelled it correctly, right? And when I try to run this, it actually gives me an error that says it does not exist in the current context. And what that means is username only exists inside of these closing and opening curly brackets. So inside the code block of printName. And I always tell people to think of methods as kind of like Las Vegas. Because have you ever heard whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? That's pretty much the same thing as a method. Because whatever you create inside of a method stays in that method. So I cannot directly access it from my main method. Now, this becomes a little bit confusing for people because you can actually start having variable names that overlap because there's only so many good names that you want to do. For example, if you're dealing with a lot of widths, you don't want to put width number 1, width number 2, width number 3, when you can just use the width. So if I go back into my main method, I can actually create a new variable called string and username, and we're going to name this one equal to a text string of, let's say, Nate, and then a semicolon after it. Now, I have created a variable called username and set it to the value of Nate. So now when I run this, notice it will print out because it actually finds it. Because this variable username, right, is a string, and it is scoped to the main method right here. So that's why I can use it because I'm still inside of my main method code block. And I can have a completely different variable, still called username, but it's going to hold the value of Dan, which if you notice, it still prints out Dan as well. Now, the question becomes, what if I take out this username? So if I just put a / in it. Now, if I run this, I get a message right now saying, hey, the variable username does not exist in the current context because my main username up here is inside of my main method. So that's why I can't see it down here.